Okay, guys, it's Baileywiki here. It's finally time to do a full deep dive on Mass Edit. A lot of you use Mass Edit already. You use it for some of the classic Mass Edit stuff. Some of you use it because you're creators that you support use it, like myself and some others. And others of you use it for Scenescapes. It just does a ton of stuff, and a lot of people don't realize how much it does because it's not like it's all there right in front of your face. So what I thought I'd do today is give everyone a deep dive on Mass Edit. Uh, Mass Edit is free, and everything that I'm going to show you today is free. There's certain premium content that can make things like Scenescapes work really well, but you don't need it. You can make all your own. And that's what we're going to jump into today. So this might be a long tutorial. I'm going to put it in timestamps so that you jump around.
And just before we start, if you're new to the Baileywiki channel, welcome. What we do is we focus on combining technology and art to help everyday GMs to make truly memorable experiences for their players, primarily using Foundry VTT and some other programs like Dungeon Draft, but you don't need to be a software developer to be here, just a tinkerer and a storyteller. We do tutorials mostly, and we talk about new things that we like across game systems. We also make assets, like everything you see in this tutorial, which you can get all of it with a single month subscription to our Patreon, which I'll link in the video description below.
So with that, let me just give you kind of like why is Mass Edit interesting, right? So first, it makes Foundry easy to manage at scale. You never have to do mundane modifications ever again. Like if you wanted to name every scene in your sidebar or something, or add a word to it, or search for something on your scene, or grab all of the roofs, or change all of your walls, just one particular aspect of them, change every light, laser target only certain lights. That's the first thing that Mass Edit lets you do. That's kind of classic Mass Edit. Second thing is it makes certain macros really easy to make, and you don't have to know how to code. So, for example, see all these kind of roofs here in the scene. If I press this macro, all these roofs change color. If I press it again, they all change colors again. And if I press this one, they all kind of go to this muted brown color. That is another thing that Mass Edit lets you do is to create macros when you have no coding ability at all. Another thing it lets you do is it makes all of your assets more manageable. So you don't even really need to deal with the file browser anymore or the sound browser. You can have Mass Edit be the place that you manage all of your assets. So all of my assets are managed in Mass Edit, and there are tens of thousands of assets in here. Um, and not just assets like tiles. If I look up diorama, I get all of these prefabs, and these are things that are special. They're smarter than regular tiles. They do different things. They might be have monks actor tiles in them, or they might be full buildings, but they're doing something else besides just being a regular tile. But then all of my tiles are also in here, and it makes it really easy to index them, search them, drag them onto your scene, but also do other interesting things like adding them to a brush and being able to add multiple assets to a scene really, really quickly. Which leads me to the fourth thing that it does is it turns Foundry into a legitimate mapping tool. It's not just a VTT tool. Any of you have been using Foundry for a while, you're like, it's great. It's an awesome VTT, but can I build my maps in it? Mass Edit, a core part of its functionality is to let you do that effectively. Make your maps inside of Foundry using tiles. As long as you have the assets from myself and other artists like Tom Kartos and Bad Cartographer and others, you have everything that you need to build maps on the fly really quickly in Foundry. It's like having Dungeon Draft inside of Foundry. It's not the whole thing. There's certain things you can't do in Foundry yet. We'll figure those out. But it really is legitimately a mapping tool when you add Mass Edit on top of it. Fifth thing that it lets you do is it lets you create cool stuff once, and then you can reuse it over and over again. So things like traps, like some really cool monks active tile trap or puzzle that you make. You can make it one time, invest the time in it, and then use it over and over again in future campaigns. It lets you make vehicles that work, that players can explore in multiple levels of vehicles, just like huge buildings that move and they can actually stick to them and you can move them around in your scene. You can make interactions like levers and switches. You can make special effects, like some of the animated things you see here. You can make effects out of token magic effects. You can make, use out of other people's stuff. So other people like myself who create lots of things like facades and buildings, you can drag them all into a scene and not have to go through all the creation part of it. And there are some well-known creators that are using Mass Edit as well. So I'll make sure I plug those at the end. And you guys can get an idea, not just from myself, but from others, where you can pull a lot of cool already made stuff into your scenes. And the last thing, the sixth thing, is it does give you different ways to tell your stories, specifically things like scenescapes, right? So like 2D scenes that you can put your players into and NPCs and let them visualize an environment like a campsite and be able to move them around that campsite, right? You can literally have battles on a scene like this. I know you're looking at some other functionality here too. I'll let you know what's going on in a little bit. Don't worry. But that's the agenda for today. We're going to talk about classic Mass Edit, what you can do with that. We're going to talk about the Mass Edit asset browser. Then we're going to get into creating and managing prefabs. So that's what replaces Token Attacher that we've been using for a few years. Then we're going to talk about Scenescapes, like what you're looking at here, and some new functionality there that hasn't existed till today. Then we're going to get into some third-party content creators that use Mass Edit and some third-party modules that work well with Mass Edit. And then we'll close it up with things that are coming soon as well. Okay, so classic Mass Edit. What was Mass Edit originally built for? Well, it's built to edit things in mass. So the functional keys are Shift F and Shift E. You'll end up using both a lot. It also introduces a couple things for you on the sidebar. One is it introduces the select tool everywhere. So even if you're not used to seeing a select tool everywhere, like for lights, for example, it lets you now have one. That means you can lasso all the lights in the scene and you can change them all at the same time. So let's lasso all of our lights. Now that they're all selected, they've all got this red outline around them, I'm going to hit Shift E and I'm going to open up the Mass Edit window. And you'll see this window a lot when you're using Mass Edit. What this is saying is, okay, I see all of the fields these have in common, including all of the core Foundry fields, even module fields. And now what do you want me to do? Do you want me to change something about these? And in this case, I'm going to say, yeah, you know what? I want to randomize this value right here, the darkness activation range. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say, okay, the and is this field, it says and. I want that to always be 1. So I'll just leave that at 1. Click apply. Now the next field is this first one here, this between field. This is the one that I want to randomize. So I'll say 0.45 up to, let's say 0.64. So that's on the way to 1, right? And I'll say 0.01 increments, and I want it to randomize. And I'll click apply. Now, once I hit apply, it's going to do that. It's going to randomize all of these lights. So now when I turn my lights down, you'll see them come on individually based on their timing. Cool, right? Just creates a great effect. You can do the same thing with walls, tiles, literally anything. If you have to manipulate more than one entity on a scene, this is a great way to do it. It also lets you paste values onto things. Like let's say you created a trap using Monk's Active Tiles and you wanted to replicate that trap on some other tiles that you've deployed. You can do that really easily. You just grab the tile that you like, press Shift E, go to the triggers that you had set up. If you right click any of these tabs, it'll select everything on the tab for you. So here's the setup tab, selected everything. If you go to actions tab and see it toggles everything there. And that's it. And then I can just hit Control C while I've got this active, and it will copy that onto the clipboard. And then I can go to something else and hit Control V, and it'll paste just these settings onto that new entity. Let me show you other things that it does here. This is applied JSON data. So you can actually Control A and Control C, all that JSON data, and you can apply that to another tile. So if I open this up, Shift E, and I go to apply JSON data, I can paste it all in there, click apply, and it's another way of letting this inherit all of that data. You can also make a preset out of it. When I click that, it will open up the preset browser, and then you can just drag the thing you made right into there, and it will attach any attachments to it and make a preset out of it. Another thing a lot of people don't realize you can do is you can make a brush out of this thing. So if I say like, look, I want just the levels information. I want all the overhead and levels tabs to be brushed. I can create a brush out of it. And then I can brush all of my other tiles. I just click them with the brush and they'll inherit all of those values as well. Okay, we also get randomization. I can randomize anything about these values, including the name. The way you do it is you just right click this toggle here and you can say find and replace. You can use regular expressions. Uh, but what we're doing here is, hey, we want to like randomize a bunch of fantasy names. So if we had a bunch of tokens selected and we click this random this dice button here, we'd get all these really cool names just generated for us. And we have other randomizations that we can use, right? Different types of names, tavern names, that kind of thing. And when you click apply, if we then applied it, anything we have selected would get a random name based on that. You can also randomize the image, right? So you can select a folder of images and you can have all those randomized. So if I had a bunch of generic tokens down here and I wanted to make them all orcs and I had a file full of orc artwork, I could just select that file from the browser, load them all in here, and click apply, and it would change all of their artwork for me. And you can randomize them, make them sequential. It's really, really powerful when you get into it. You can also do things like randomizing their tint color or even their dungeon draft color. So remember dungeon draft, it's the name of a third-party program for mapping, but it does something really cool that we brought into Foundry, and that's this tint adjuster, right? So it makes anything with red pixels be any color that you want. It turns the red pixels into any color that you want. So you can use this as well. It has that built in so that you can randomize the colors. I've done this in other tutorials, but you can create all kinds of different color patterns and create multiple hues, and you can have them be explicit colors, but it's really, really powerful for changing just and randomizing colors, giving some variety to your maps. You can also do things that people don't realize. You can append stuff to fields. So if I like right click and it shows if I hover over it that it's adding, I can say, add the name demo to everything that's selected, and it will add this to the end. I believe if you use carrots, either that or maybe that, it'll append it to the beginning. But that's if you right click. If you right click it again, it'll take things away. So maybe you want to get rid of a word. So for example, I often find space copy in parentheses in a lot of assets I build, just say duplicate things once I've made the first one. And maybe I want to get rid of those really quickly. This will help me do that super fast. Another thing that people don't realize is when you have a token selected and you use your mass edit button, you can click this little guy up here, and that will help you change the ownership and permissions for that actor. So also super powerful. Another thing you can do when you're looking for things is you can use a wildcard search. So if I have this selected and I press Shift F, and I want to find all of these animated canopies, I can come up here and get rid of all of this and just put a wildcard there. And if I hit search, it's going to select anything else that has that path up to that wildcard. Couple things that are good to note. If you ever make mass changes, you can actually usually Control Z and undo those changes because Mass Edit will keep track of a certain amount of changes that you've made. And another thing that may go unnoticed is Mass Edit does introduce under your tile controls this little button called Pixel Perfect Hover. If you turn that without it turned on, Foundry, if I'm hovering around here, Foundry is just going to look at whatever hitbox I'm over and it will select that, but it makes it really hard to select things underneath it. If you turn that on, Pixel Perfect Hover, it will just look at the pixels of what you're trying to select, and it will just select those. So you see, it doesn't select that roof unless I'm right over the pixels there. It's very, very powerful if you want to use Foundry for mapping. It's almost necessary. As far as notable third-party modules, Tagger is the main one that's going to work with this sort of classic part of Mass Edit. We're going to go through some of these in more detail in later sections, but keep in mind there's also key bindings that can be helpful for you when you're using Mass Edit, right? Here's the Shift E, Shift C, and Shift V. These are all helpful things if you want to copy and paste uh, data from placeables onto each other. And the last thing is you can create macros. Now this is super powerful, right? So I can create a macro that can target everything in the scene. I can target a particular search. So I can look for all of these fields and say anything that matches those fields, I want to do something with them. We'll get to that in a second. I can look at all the IDs of whatever I have selected, or I can look up a tag. This is super powerful. You can tag everything that you want to change later with Tagger, and you can actually look up those tags. Again, either in the active scene or your entire world, or just what you have selected. Remember, this is building a macro, so this is important. These let you create macros where you don't have to have the thing selected first. It'll just look for their values and make the change. So this is like really powerful. If you made a mistake in your whole world and you have something you have to change everywhere, this is how you do that. And you don't have to know any code to get there. Here's where we're looking at certain tags. And then once we find the stuff that we want, then we can use these different actions. We can update them to have all of these values now. We can toggle the values. So we can say, okay, if you're on these values now, I want you to toggle to these values. And this can be a lot more simple. Like you could just say, I want all doors or all walls. Maybe you have a map that changes for in the same scene because your players interact with something. Like maybe an area of the map opens up. You can have the walls and the artwork and everything else change by clicking this macro. If you just say I want to toggle them on or off. So maybe those walls appear and they disappear. That's how you do it with toggle. You can also just open up the Mass Edit form. So maybe you just want to target things and then change them on the fly. And then you can also delete all the things that match that criteria. So you can also specify whether you want to toggle their hidden state, between on and off. And you can do this special thing. You can say, I want to actually select the target. So when I launch this macro, if you find something that matches, I want you to select it because maybe I want to do something that requires selection, like applying a token magic effects, right? So maybe I want to make it look ghostly, a bunch of enemies. I want to make them turn into ghosts when I click this macro. Or toggle being a ghost on and off. That's how you do that using this. Once you hit generate, it'll generate a macro that you can use forever. So when I showed you this macro earlier, how to change the color of roofs, this was made with Mass Edit, right? So all of this JSON, you don't really have to know how to write it. You just use Mass Edit and it'll write it for you. And it will take care of the toggling and whatever behavior you're trying to get it to do. Okay, so that's like core Mass Edit stuff, and that alone is going to probably make you want to install and have Mass Edit part of your kind of core set of modules when you're using Foundry. Okay, the next thing that Mass Edit is good for is your asset browser. So over here is your asset browser. If you have a lot of assets when you open it the first time, it might be a little slower. Every time you open it now, after you've launched your world, it'll be faster. And what this does is it lets you index all of your stuff. So if you come up here to this little box, you can see you can add as many sources of assets that you want. I've just got my module selected because I use this world for packing up our releases. But you can add keyword filters and folder filters and basically index all your stuff, all your audio and tiles. And what it does is it'll make them all searchable by keyword. And then you can go further and even tag your stuff if you want to. Once you do that, they all show up in this virtual directory. Virtual directory is activated here, right? So I can show the virtual directory or hide it. Virtual directory is literally just all the stuff that you own. If you make prefabs and things like that, you're going to end up putting those into kind of your main directory, and you'll be able to keep those and use those forever after as just stuff that you've got, right? My little phantom steed here using Jinker's animated steed. It's got a special region that my players can stick to. So once my player's on it, oh, Pixel Perfect doesn't work well with animated stuff. My player will stay on this horse, right? You can also do things like looking at external compendiums. So that's my virtual directory. But if I open up external compendiums, if I'm using a provider, third-party content provider like Baileywiki, I can open up all of their compendiums. So in these compendiums, you're going to find all of my presets and prefabs and things that all the traps and vehicles and everything else and hundreds of buildings and other stuff can all be found in there. And it's all indexed. So if I just look up blacksmith, up here up top, I'll find all of these um, ready-made buildings that I can go into and explore. I can find all of these merchant canopies that are easy to drop on any scene, but I can keep going and see all the blacksmith gear and brushes and things that have been created by a creator to make it easy to drop their stuff into Foundry. Once you see this blue line start, that's your virtual directory, and that's where you can expand this out. And I've got all kinds of blacksmith gear, tools, furniture, and other things for me to decorate my scenes with, including any animated files to help bring a little life to the party. You may want to keep a lot of these on by default, like scaling your tiles and drawings and such to the grid size that you're working with, depending on how the artist coded them in. Automatic layer switching just means if you're on tile controls, it'll open up the tile tab when you open this up. And then you can lock the current category as the default form that opens. So I keep mine locked to tiles. And then you have all your different entity types, right? So like audio, different lights. Remember, you can create lights that are prefabs. If you like how you made this light and you want it to be like how all your torches look, just grab it, drag it into your preset browser, give it a name, and you can use that forever afterwards. All of the walls, I have a special way that I like to do windows, for example, so I'll keep those here. And then, of course, you have your all category, which is everything. And you can even now keep scenes in Mass Edit, which is, I'll give you a little preview. There's something new coming with scenes to be able to manage them all in here as well, at least for Baileywiki stuff here next month. And then you have what's called bags. And bags are special collections that you make of your stuff. You can create bags just to simply have all of your chairs in one place, for example, if you like that. But you can also create bags and then give the access to that bag to your players. Now your players can do things like building a town or putting furniture around a room or doing other things that they might find unique and interesting in the VTT world. You can use bags for that. You can create new bags, new folders, do different types of sorts. You can look at tags if there's any tags in your systems. You can change what comes under this drop down here if you don't use a lot of presets for other entity types. Here you can change your main compendium. You're going to be mostly on your main compendium. I have a lot of content across compendiums, but whatever's active will let you edit those things more than just like changing their tags, for example. If you need to change something, it's got to be in your active compendium. And what Mass Edit's doing is it's just storing all of this stuff as journal entries. So it's really got a bunch of visible and invisible journals here in your compendium browser, and it's using those to stuff all of these in. So when I say my active compendium, these are compendiums of journal entries that are storing all this data. You can also import and export things. So if I want to grab all of these and I want to export them, I can do that and it will drop in, or it'll put everything into JSON, and then I can hand that to a friend. And when they click import and they import that same file, all of these bags will show up in their Mass Edit browser. This also lets content creators create stuff and let you benefit from it. Next thing I want to show you is actually editing things inside of your Mass Edit browser. If you right click it, you have a whole bunch of options here too. When you click edit, it opens up an entire window of stuff that you can do. You can actually change the data fields that you had. You can make it so that you randomize something from here. So you can randomize stuff so that when you drop this preset in, it will randomize that attribute, right? So that works well with lights or colors or other things. You can also delete fields. So if you have fields that you don't want to inherit, maybe it's the size of the tile, something like that, you can grab them, hold down Shift or Control, and then just delete whatever you want to delete, and it will not try to apply those values. It will just leave whatever entity you're painting these values onto or dropping onto, it'll leave it blank. You can also assign the tile. So maybe you dropped in this preset and you made some changes to it. Well, if you go here to edit, while this is selected, you can assign that preset back to it, and it will give it the same or it will give it all the attributes that you just coded. So if you want to like see how what you're doing to a preset after you made some changes, you want to save it back, this is what does it for you. You can also, of course, change the name. You can change the thumbnail. It doesn't have to match what the preset is. The preset could be multiple entities all connected together. We'll get into that. But you can change them all here. You can change its spawning behavior, attach other things to it that spawn with it. You can change some of the fields. So actually have it prompt you. When I drop this in, I want it to prompt me for the size, the scale, the X and Y scale of it. Really powerful stuff. You can have it if there's a group of objects within this preset, you can randomize them. You can preserve links, which you generally don't want to do because it will regenerate the links for you. You kind of want that behavior, but there's certain situations where you don't. You may also have built this in a grid that's not the standard 100 pixel grid size. So you may want to specify in here that you built it at 150 pixels. That way it will scale down to the right size or up to the right size, depending on what other people are using. You can also even apply scripts. So I have certain presets like my unlimited terrains where if I drop them in, they'll do some automatic stuff. They'll launch some scripts or some macros when it drops on the canvas. And finally, you can add tags. So if you want to keep your stuff situated or use tags, you can do that. And then all you do here in the search is you add the pound sign and just say like BW, and that'll bring up all your Baileywiki stuff, right? But if you're using like Mad Cartographer or one of the others, you can look for their hashtags, or maybe you want to search for hashtag building, and it'll just bring up anything that's tagged with buildings. And as you hover, you can see the tags that this particular asset has here in yellow. And of course, you can just look up building by itself, and it will look up any assets that have the word building in it. Looking at some other things, you can also, we'll get into brush here in a second, you can open the journal entry. So everything's got a journal entry associated with it. Sometimes you'll find FAQs attached to it, kind of relatively rare right now, but you can also, if you build your own and you want to add FAQs, just add a page. This page is locked with the data for the preset. But if you add a page, you can put more information, attach information to a preset that might help you in the future. If you're a content creator, you can use that. With this selected, I can right click this and say apply to these placeables, and it would just swap that out with the preset information. I can duplicate this and create a copy and start editing that copy. Or maybe I want to use a Baileywiki thing, but I want to change it. I want to make my own version of it. So I can copy a Baileywiki thing into my working compendium, and then I can edit from there. If I copied a clipboard, it will copy the data to the clipboard, and then I can paste it somewhere else. I can also copy the UUID. I can export this whole thing to JSON just so I can share it with other people. I can also export it to a compendium, right? And any compendiums that I have unlocked, it will let me push this to that compendium. And then, of course, I can add this thing to a brush. When I add it to a brush, it opens up the special brush window. I'll get to that in a second. A new thing with this is, with the asset browser, is we now have category browsers. These are special macros that launch this window, and it only works with Baileywiki stuff right now because I'm the only one who's gone through the tagging process to create this. But essentially, you can look through all of my assets in more of a category way, right? So if I want to look at, I'm building a scene and I want some decoration in it, and I want to look at furniture and tables and chairs, I can immediately just filter to those things, and I can start using these assets. I find something I like, and everything works just like the other asset browser window. I can brush it, open its journal, all that good stuff. But this just makes it easy to see, like, here's all the lights. I want candles, torches, braziers, lanterns, so on and so forth. I can look at all of the settlement stuff. Let me show me everything that would go in a marketplace. Show me structural things like pillars and roofs and canopies. Show me all the buildings, including facades, right? These are all the facades. These are all just fake buildings that I can drop into a scene and really quickly, I can just rotate them. I'll get to this when I get to the brush, and I can just, fill a scene full of buildings that can't be entered, but they've got lights and walls and other things to make them look realistic. All of the nature stuff, the diorama tiles, certain biomes like tropics and deserts. If you guys haven't heard of my unlimited terrains, these are things you can just drop this into any scene and it will make an unlimited terrain. In fact, the scene you're looking at here is made with this. It's made with snowy streets, but they're just, you drop them in, you can dynamically adjust the position and make the map look any way that you want. Dungeons, including like traps and levers and all the dungeon decor items and rubble pieces and metal dungeons and stone dungeons and dungeon rooms. And it's just like all the stuff that you need to kind of map with, right? All of my active tiles, all the vehicles, right? So like land vehicles, like wagons and such, sleds and sleighs, sea vehicles, right? So all the ships and triremes and galleons and rowboats, and then the air vehicles, right? So airships. But it's a cool thing to use. You have a couple of abilities here. You can do a global search on. So no matter where you're looking, if you're just like, hey, I just want to find a sword, just type sword and you get everything that matches that. Or I want a sword that's also tagged as equipment. And so you can search tags. Any search that works over here works over here. If I turn that off, it'll look for these only in the active category that I'm in, right? So if I'm in something like equipment and weapons, and I search for sword, it'll show me only things that are inside of the weapon category. If you toggle this off, just like it works over here, if you toggle off the virtual directory, you see how it got a lot shorter. Now it's only showing me prefabs and brushes, right? These are more advanced things. If I turn it on, now I can go down and see all of the virtual directory stuff. These are just like all the tiles that I've got in the library if I want to just find something and drag it into a scene. And these buttons work the same way as you're used to in the main browser. So let me know in the comments what you think about this category browser. I do have something new I'll announce at the end, but we'll probably be using this also, like you'll see us build one just for Scenescapes. So you just have an easy way of bringing up all the Scenescape stuff and designing those. And let me know if you got other ideas for certain kinds of category browsers that we should consider. The next thing we're going to look at is making prefabs. So I showed you what prefabs look like in the browser, but like how you make them and linker functionality. This is also important to know. So, this scene right here, let's say that like this boat right here, this is made of a few pieces, right? So it's got a token magic effects, bobbing thing applied to this tile, but it's also got a light on it. And it's also got a sound attached to it. It's even got a region attached to a special region. But all those things stick together and they make a prefab, right? So I can move this around, but everything moves around with it. Even this little lamp at the top is just another tile attached to it. So how do you make that? You make that with Mass Edit. Used to be we used to use token attacher, but now we don't need tokens anymore. Just everything kind of sticks to itself and it's really intuitive. So, if these were all separate pieces and I want to link them together, I press the L key, the linker key, and that opens up this little special menu here. And you can see when I hover over this thing, it shows me everything that's attached to it. And I can attach other things, right? So, I can select this here. And if I dragged it down, it would select all the stuff, the lights, everything through all the layers that are in this spot and attach them all together, right? If I just want to attach like one particular thing, right, I go to this light. As long as this menu's open, I can attach that light and it'll attach it to this boat piece, this boat tile that's serving as like the main attachment. I can also press the U key and unlink things. So if I want this light to be on its own, again, I can press the U key and it will free it from whatever bondage it's in to an attachment. If I want to look at more detail about all of my prefabs, I can press Shift Q, and this menu will open up all of the prefabs in this scene. So it'll look for anything that's linked, and when you hover over that main link, you can see all the pieces that are attached to it. And you can change the behavior of some of these things. So for example, this tile with this light, what this means here is that the light, if I move the rest of the prefab, like you saw, the light will move with it. But if I just move the light, it won't move the prefab, right? So this light is only receiving data. That's what this arrow means. And if I wanted to change the behavior, I could click it and send it the other way. Now only the light can move it around, or it's neutral, or here it's back to moving it to the left. So this is how you can like really fine tune how you build some prefabs and where you want things to control their movement and not. You can also just, if I right click this, it will delete the whole prefab. And it won't delete, I'm sorry, it'll delete the connection. It won't delete all the pieces, but it will remove the prefab connection and render it just separate pieces again. This can be really helpful if when you're building prefabs, especially if you're a content creator. And you can see too, you have a few other buttons to use and some help as well. Now, once you have a prefab created, if you're in, your main, whatever compendium you want to save it to, just grab it, right? This tile has everything else connected to it. Just drag it into your preset browser. It'll say, hey, we see 4 attachments. Do you want to include them? Yeah, I sure do. Give it a name, my cool rowboat. Maybe give it a tag. Maybe you want to do some special spawning behavior. Maybe you want to change some of the things that spawn with it, but ultimately you just say, okay, and now you've got your rowboat, and when I double click it, I can put it anywhere that I want. Now, we didn't go over this, but there's a couple of really cool key bindings here. So when I'm in this mode, this preview mode, where I'm just kind of dragging it around, not only do I see like where the light's going to hit, super helpful that way, but I can press shift and rotate it, or I can press control and rotate it more slightly, or I can press alt and I can scale it up and down, and you notice the lights and everything else scale with it. And then I can press Control Shift if I had multiple things selected, and it would cycle through them. So let's talk about that. Let's get into the brush here really quickly. Let's say I had a bunch of swords. Let's look for sword, and I want to go down to, all of my swords that I've got in my compendiums. Maybe I'll just grab these swords. I'm holding shift and I'm going to right click any one of them and I'm going to add them to a brush. So then you get this brush window, and this brush window does a ton of stuff, right? So if you used a dungeon draft, you can have it randomly rotate your object 360 degrees or just within a certain confined space. You can have it randomly scale your object. And then you can decide how many objects do you want it to put down as you drag your mouse across, right? So sometimes this could be helpful with things like bushes and grass. You just want to be careful about putting too many tiles on a particular scene, just for performance reasons. Then you can also do things, I won't go through this in detail, but you can like randomize these things. So if I click random, as I hit Control Shift, you can see it randomly jumps through that list, and it's randomly changing the sword that's about to get placed down. That's Control Shift again. But I can do other things like scaling it, rotate, all that good stuff. You can also apply different colored effects. Right now, if effects is turned on, it'll change the dungeon draft effect. If it's turned off, it'll change the tint. So if I change this to red, for example, it will place red swords around. I can delete that to get rid of it. You can also reset your controls here. And I don't know if you noticed that, but you can randomize. If you click the randomization, you get all those randomization for colors. So I've reset everything. There's some other things, fun stuff that it does, but you can also apply a bunch of effects. So when you click that on, all these Baileywiki presets, these effects that come loaded if you subscribe to my stuff, you can apply, drop shadows to things that when you place them down, or fire effects, or leaves that are swaying in the wind. If you've got some static trees, you can actually animate them. Tons of stuff that you can do with effects. You just pick the one that you like, press save, and now when I place that sword, it'll include a drop shadow with it. Another big thing you can do with this, if people don't realize, is you can hit the macro button, and you can actually create a macro that has all of these brush settings pre-built. So if I say, yeah, I want to do this, I want to do it based on these names, here's this new macro, and I can call it my, sword macro. And now it'll, when I click on it, I'll close this. I'll go to my macros, look up sword macro. And when I just click it and activate it, execute macro, I can drag it to my macro bar and do it there. It gives me everything I just set up in a brush, ready to go, effects and all. Cool, right? Other things that you can do, I'll just point out with hotkeys. So when you have the brush activated, swords are probably a bad example, but you can press V and it will mirror it vertically. and you can press H and it'll mirror it horizontally. Not so impressive with swords, but if you get something really big like a tavern, let's grab this tavern here. I'll just double click it. And now I'm in preview mode. So this thing's huge. If I press H, all the stuff, even the lights and the walls will mirror. So maybe you want to orientate this a certain way on your map, but you really need to have it be vertically or horizontally different. You want to orientate it differently. You can do that just by pressing H or V. That's really huge. When you've got a really complicated prefab, you'd never be able to do that just changing all the pieces manually. I mentioned the bags that you can create for your players. Here's a bag full of campsite stuff. If I open this bag, here's my bag full of camp stuff, right? And I want my players to have this. It's got torches and campfires, some wagons. This is stuff that maybe the party owns. I want to let them set up their campsites. These tents that can go inside. It's super nice. So I'm going to create a macro. I can create a macro out of this, and it will make a macro that is this bag of stuff. And then all I have to do is just go open up that macro, and you just like right click them and you just configure ownership. So you actually give ownership of your bag to your players. That's really fun and powerful stuff. You can put spells. So I've got things where they have like magic spawns, right? So if I open this bag, here's like Instant Fortress and Phantom Steed and some teleporters and a boat that they can deploy. They can do that themselves, just having all their gear in a bag that I've created for them. Okay, next up is Scenescapes. I also have dedicated videos on Scenescapes, but essentially it lets you build these 2D worlds and move stuff around in them. So it should work automatically. I have an older version, but if you hit Shift Z, if it's not working, just hit Shift Z, and it will automatically scale things that you've put into the scene. So, these trees that have this really cool animation applied to them, it's just a token magic effect, right? I can move these trees around and put them in different places in the scene. And now my players, as they move around, they're behind the rock, they're back here in the distance, they're behind and now in front of things. So you can really build scenes where your players are present and they can interact with each other. And you can tell a story a different way, right? But what you have with Mass Edit is the ability to do this. So if I just look up Scenescapes, I have all of these things available. So if I want like to drop a castle in my scene, I can drop it in, and while it's in preview mode, I can hold down Alt and scale it and put it exactly where I want it, right? And now my players have something else that they can explore, right? And all these things are just presets. You can attach lights to them and other stuff that you find interesting. The way Scenescapes work is you basically just start a new scene and then you right click and go to the configuration of it. And it's down here that you can set your Scenescape attributes. I've got a whole tutorial in this as well. You just basically drag these things in. You see these little cutouts. They set up the dimensions of the scene and like how you want things to scale as they approach the camera. Then you can set the movement amount. So as you press the left and right keys and move them around. And then you can also set like black bars around everything, right? That's what makes it so these objects are behind this kind of black bar. And then you can have your pixel perfect hover enabled for the scene as well, which helps. Some things that are new, if you guys haven't noticed, you don't have the big yellow hitboxes around tokens anymore. You just have this nice yellow outline. Just shows you who you've got selected without being too distracting. Another thing is if I double right click any of my players and I go to appearance, I now have the ability to auto flip for Scenescapes, and usually you'll do horizontally. What that means is that my player will now change their orientation depending on which direction they're walking, right? And you can create artwork for players where they're looking like left and right. And it's super effective, right? So a couple things more before we finish. One, some third-party modules that you'll probably want to have as well. I already mentioned Tagger. It's great for using the kind of classic Mass Edit to find stuff, tag things. Multiple document select by Iron Monk is super great with Mass Edit. It basically lets you edit all the stuff in your sidebar. So if you have a bunch of scenes, you just hold down your mouse button and I press Shift to select all of these. And when I right click, or if I just press Shift E at that point, it brings up my mass edit window and I can change things. So if I want to add like a word to each one of these, if I want to add space new to each one of these and click apply, see now it's added. I thought I messed it up. I did it twice, but it just changed it. So you can edit like all sorts of stuff, like permissions and things for lots of things all at the same time using the same functionality. That's Iron Monk's multiple document select. You also might want to consider if you want bags that you can give your players access to, you can do that. But if you want them to be able to move the things in the bag afterwards, like they drop a tent, now you want them to move it around, you're going to want to get Move That For You, which is a free module by ADIF. As far as other creators that use mass edit, so obviously myself, and we pay for it and fund it, and that's why you see a lot of development around it. But you also have other great creators like Mad Cartographer uses mass edit. Also Droid Cartographer. I guess if you are a cartographer, you might want to use mass edit. Now I will just say for creators, there is a commercial license for it because we pay for ongoing development for mass edit. It is very expensive as a creator to keep it up, but we want to make it free to all of you. And it just makes everything better. So if you are a creator and you're interested, you can reach out. There's a link off of the Mass Edit page, or I think also off my Patreon, to inquire about the commercial license for it. The more creators that use it, the lower we can make that commercial license as well. Right now, there's just a few of us that are large creators that use it because it's so good for our content. But that means just a couple of creators are really kind of carrying the whole load. But if we find a lot of interest with other creators, we can definitely start to bring the cost down for the commercial license for everybody. And I mentioned just things that are coming in the future, that category browser that you saw. I'm going to create one that's a scene browser. So all of our hundreds of Baileywiki scenes, being able to make those really easily searchable and just from a macro like you see here, you'll see that coming probably in the next release, just working on tagging scenes right now. But that'll make it really fast for you to come in and just be like, look, I just want a forest scene. We'll have everything that has to do with a forest tagged. It could be a settlement, could be just regular forest, could be a template for forest, just to make it really, really easy for you and to free us of the limitations of the scene name to find stuff, right? Historically, you have to just look up, Baileywiki's 2D scenes, and then you have to like know what it might be called. Like I might look up fort, and that might bring up some scenes, but this will make it easier. It'll also make the thumbnails for the scenes a lot bigger, and it'll make it easy to browse them and kind of see what the scene's going to look like. So between tagging and thumbnails, you guys are going to have a really fun time searching for scenes across my library. And with that, that's the big stuff with Mass Edit. I hope you guys learned something new in all of this. Again, treat this as a resource. Come back to the timestamps for places where you need more information. And if there's something you'd like me to deep dive on, I probably already have a tutorial on it. But if you can't find it, let me know. Maybe I need to make a refresh tutorial, like deep diving, like how to make macros, for example. Let me know in the comments what features you love the most and what you use the most. Maybe let me know what was a surprise to you, kind of, so I know, like, as we're developing, like what kinds of things do I need to talk about more. And other than that, thanks everybody for your support. I hope you really enjoy Mass Edit and the things that you can do with it. In the meantime, have fun making your maps.